We are having a conversation now about Millennial Bosses with Jim Whitten joining us at ESPN 93.5. Hi, Jim. How are you?
Hi, Dan. Good to be with you.
You too. So I was just reading some statistics about by 2025, a full 75% of the U.S. workforce will be millennials. And they won't be necessarily the young workers that we think of now. They'll be leading organizations, owning their own companies. They could be the boss. And you could be working for them within the next, 7 to 10 years. So as far as our millennial workplace expert, we wanted to visit with you and find out what you're thinking these days. I know you have a book called The Old School Advantage, Timeless Tools for Every Generation. So tell us about these millennial bosses and what we should expect in the future.
Well, you're right. They're going to be in their mid-40s, the oldest ones, when 2025 comes along. So plenty old enough to be supervisors and have some experience. Here's the thing about millennials. Generally, we think of them as someone that they value immediate feedback, they like autonomy, and they're about serving a greater purpose. Now, those three characteristics are not really bad to think about in any boss or supervisor, so I would say that's a positive. But here's the other thing to think about, Diane. Regardless of what generation you're from, if you rise to the level of supervisor or boss, you're likely pretty old school. And what I mean by that is you're probably wise beyond your years anyway. So I'm not sure we should think of the average millennial or the average anybody as being the boss. Typically, they're going to be a cut above. They're not going to be average, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is that millennials bring the technology and the enthusiasm of youth to the table. And then boomers who might work for them, they're going to bring experience and hopefully some wisdom to the table. So that really makes a pretty good team. That's the best of both worlds coming together. And so then it's a matter of how are they going to communicate and work together.
And that can be challenging, especially when you have an older generation versus a younger generation. Oftentimes you come with, kind of a chip on your shoulder saying that young punk's pushing me around.
Well, that's possible. But, I would encourage older listeners right now to also understand that millennials, they love to be coached. And that may seem a little counterintuitive, but they really do. They work well when they're amongst experienced mentors. And so if you didn't know that, I hope you realize that now, that there's mentoring opportunities and there's reverse mentoring opportunities, again, in those areas of technology or kind of the latest methods, because they've been in college more recently than us boomers. So, we're teaching organizations across the country, how do you bridge those, create some generation bridging strategies or concepts. And that could be as simple as just getting to know each other on a personal level. You'd be surprised how many times we go into an organization and they don't know the hometown of somebody they've sat next to and worked with for a decade, because they've maintained conversations on a business level and never gone personal. But if you can build rapport across the generations, then it's not only going to be advantageous, but you're going to have a heck of a lot of fun, because you're going to realize that your life stories are really pretty similar.
Yeah.
And that's been pretty consistent across the board.
That's terrific advice. Jim Whitten here on ESPN 93.5 at 7:40 this morning, visiting about millennials that could be our bosses in the future and how they're kind of different kind of managers. And I feel like there's more of a team concept. And as long as the goals are outlined well within the company, you can advance as a team and, make profits and make money. And that's the eventual goal.
Oh, absolutely. And like I said, you want to create a culture of questions. And what I mean by that is don't be afraid to ask. So many of our problems are because we're afraid to ask.
Mm-hmm.
And then create stories together. Those could be corporate narratives. They could be personal narratives that you use to teach each other in the workplace. This is what life is about. Life is about stories, and I think we kind of get in our compartmentalized general titles of our generations, and we don't come together and share those experiences. That's always the way it's been in America. We gather around the hearth with our grandparents, our parents, the kids, the grandkids, and tell stories. That's how we pass down culture. And so we try to encourage that same thing in the workplace. And then the generation gap never is going to go away because of the calendar effect, but we can certainly mitigate it to a large degree by doing some of those kinds of things.
I've only worked for a younger boss and probably 10 years younger than me when I did radio in Chicago on the weekends, and I hardly ever saw him. But when I did, it seems like he was kind of angry and critical of my show and things like that. And I wasn't learning and growing, and I kind of would go to my shift as kind of a beaten puppy. And, I think that was because we didn't have anything personal in common. He was more of a city kid, and I'm from a small town, and we just couldn't find any common ground for me to try to bond with him. What do you do in that kind of situation?
Well, I would first ask, what kind of conversations did you have to that end? In other words, did you talk about where you were from, where you went to college, what you liked about those places? Did you talk about family, friends, hobbies? What do you like to do in your free time? I mean, by the time you ask those 3 or 4 questions, it's almost impossible not to have something in common, and then give you a basis as a subordinate to enter into his or her world in a personal way. Once you've got that rapport, then I can promise you the work issues aren't going to go away completely, because we still all have to do a good job and answer to people.
Sure.
But there's the personal connection is just in some ways miraculous in terms of making things easier on the job. So I would encourage that. And we teach a definite pattern. We call it lava because it gets the conversation flowing and it warms up things. And it's in the book in chapter 2 of the Old School Advantage. But institutionalize that concept, and you'll be amazed at what happens in terms of camaraderie at the company.
Jim, how can we reach you online in case we want more information?
Yeah, theoldschooladvantage.com is the easiest way to reach me. And then my main website, The Old School, where we go into companies and help them, is also a link there. But you can get the book there, you can get it online, or you can walk into your local bookstore over the weekend and grab it.
Nice. ESPN 93.5. Have a great day, Jim.
You do the same. Thank you.